Values dictate or determine how you relate to the outside world. So they have to see that you're actually engaging them with these values. But they also have to, and this is really important, they also have to tell you how you operate internally.
Exactly. And this is that what you might call corporate culture. It's the culture part of it.
Right.
Are you actually living out the values that you say you have and that you're maybe displaying on the outside? What's up, family, and welcome to another episode of the Future is Here podcast. I'm your host, Tommy Nixon. Of course, I'm here with my man, Robert Aboitis.
Welcome.
And you know, we're here to discuss leadership principles that you need to lead this next generation. And so we've been getting into it. And so today, actually, what we're talking about is strategic leadership. Now, Robert, why do I even have to make the distinction between leadership and strategic leadership?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of ways that you can lead. You can lead through activity.
Okay.
You can lead independently, just as an individual, by example. But there's a kind of leadership that we think it takes, in order to lead sort of, let's call it larger things, right? Bigger movements, larger organizations, more impactful, things with greater capacity, right? Because you can lead a lot of things just strictly through activity, but if you're going to lead big, you need to lead through strategy.
Okay, so no, that's really good. And for those of you guys who are listening, you might be like, "Oh, yeah, strategy." Can we share with you that most leaders we know and work with aren't strategic leaders?
No.
In fact, most leaders that you probably look up to and like are probably not strategic, right? And so here's a little caveat, okay? Like little sidebar real quick, because you and I have talked about this a lot. What's the difference, Robert, between a visionary leader and a strategic leader, right?
Here we go.
And you and I, we've talked a lot about this, right? Tell me some of the tension there for you.
Well, I think it's actually not the difference between a visionary and a strategic leader. Because I think in order to be visionary,
you need to be strategic.
I think you have to be strategic.
Okay,
right?
But so tell me how, then when people talk about visionary leaders, where you're like,
I think most of the time when I hear that term visionary leader, I think about someone who actually can imagine a different future reality.
That's not current.
Yeah. Right? Like they can step into the future. We talk about this all the time. We're like, hey man, we as leaders, we got to be living in the future, right? And so when I think about visionary leaders, I think about leaders who are like that, who are always, they're active in the present, but they're living in the future.
Yeah.
They're living in that future reality already. Like they see it, they can taste it, right? They understand it. They know that it's a better place. And the reality is that most people don't necessarily see that.
Right.
Most people can't see that. Now, a lot of times people call themselves visionary leaders when they create something new. Like, I did this new thing, and so therefore
I started a nonprofit,
or I'm running this church, and this church grew, and therefore I must be a visionary leader.
And a lot of times, there's other people calling them visionary.
Sure. They don't necessarily self-identify as visionary leaders, but I also know that a lot of times visionary leaders are just about, I know how to set goals. And when I set these big goals and I get there, that makes me a visionary leader.
Okay. So what we're saying, friends, is just because your leader set a goal for $1 million doesn't mean like they're a visionary leader. Just because your church or org's never had $1 million. Right. Or they're a visionary leader because they want to buy a building and grow it. You're like, what you're saying is, that's not visionary. That happens all the time.
We should be doing, right?
Yeah, we should be.
You own a business and, hopefully, you want to grow it.
You grow.
It doesn't make you visionary. That's what you're supposed to do.
And are we also saying it's okay if you're not a visionary leader?
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely. So know that, right? But one thing you did say though, if you want to be a visionary leader or you are one, you can't be a visionary leader without being a strategic leader.
Right.
And even if you're not a visionary leader, we still think you should be strategic.
Yeah. I think strategic leadership leads you to visionary leadership.
Okay.
Because
talk about it.
As you begin to think more strategically as opposed to tactically, because that's the biggest difference, right?
Okay, yeah, here we go.
Tactics says, oh, I got to accomplish something right now, and I'm really good at getting that thing done, right? I see a need, I feel a need. That's very tactical, right? Strategy says, oh, I see the need, but I'm going to think way ahead in the future. I may not meet that need right now, but I'm creating something, or I'm moving people towards something where maybe that need doesn't become a need anymore.
Mhm.
So that's like much kind of bigger thinking, right? In the last episode, you talked about homelessness, for example.
Yeah.
And one of the examples we give with in our certification class when we talk about strategy and the difference between tactical leadership and strategic leadership is this idea. Like, for example, if I ask the question, "Hey, how would you solve homelessness as a leader?" Right? I think a lot of times we go to solutions that are again tactical. Oh, well, I would. You know what? I'd give them food. I'd hand out blankets. We do, sweater giveaways, jacket giveaways, right? There's all this stuff that you can do with the homeless that's helpful.
Yeah.
Obviously, they're in need,
Yeah.
right? But if you think about it, that's not solving homelessness.
Yeah.
You're alleviating the symptoms of homelessness, which again, absolutely necessary. And it's a beautiful thing to serve in that way, especially serve your community that way. But that's tactical leadership when it comes to the problem of homelessness.
And yeah, it's disconnected from the actual solution to the
Right.
problem that we're saying we're fixing.
Right.
Yeah.
And so strategic leadership is going to be thinking a lot deeper and a lot longer term about, well, wait, what do we really need? So for example, maybe we need education, not just educating those individuals who are in the homeless community about opportunities, or different ways that they can maybe kind of get out of that, but also educating people who are serving the homeless.
Right.
So
Yeah.
education is a strategy that can help us resolve the
Right.
homelessness issue, right? So you start thinking about kind of bigger approaches to a problem. Now you're starting to move into the strategic realm.
Right. But we don't see a lot of people doing that.
No.
I mean, so what we do see is a ton of people doing, you said earlier, activity, right? So the tactical, activity driven, and then calling it vision or visionary leadership is really killing us because you're not seeing the results. In fact, I mean, in our world, right, you're seeing like the exact opposite.
Yeah.
Now, what we've been giving our time and energy to over the last 30, 40 years, hasn't worked. Has God been good in it? Yes, man.
Of course.
Has God worked through it despite us? Yes, he's good. And we'll make mistakes as we come up with strategy now, or
Yeah.
things will change and we'll learn from it. But the reality is you got 1.2 million young people leaving the church every year. There's something wrong, right?
Yeah.
And we keep on going back to the same activities and calling it vision or you know what I mean? Or what's our strategy? But I'm like, we didn't actually press the strategy part of that. That's what we called it, but
Right.
we're just doing a bunch of activities. And so like share a little bit about like what's how, because we've been doing a lot of coaching. What does that look like? What have we been seeing a lot, especially on that kind of to help our leaders know like, oh, maybe I am just doing a bunch of activities. How do I know?
Yeah. Well, I think what happens when we meet with leaders, and even we're talking not just talking about leaders who are running or leading in small spaces,
Yeah.
maybe youth ministries or parts of church or departments, but we're talking about leaders who are leading nonprofits as well, right?
Yeah.
And so a lot of times what happens, and again, please hear us. There's nothing wrong with doing this. We're not saying
Yeah.
it's wrong to be this way. We're saying that we shouldn't think that we're being strategic and visionary when really all we're being is tactical. And if that's what God's called you to be, blessings on you for that, okay? But
yeah.
but we do believe
Yeah.
that every leader needs to steward the gifts that they have and the responsibility that they have and the calling that they have well by learning to become strategic.
Yeah.
And that's something that you can absolutely learn to do. So I think what happens a lot is we see leaders who go from, they see a burden and they want to fill that need of that burden. And so they go from burden to activity,
Yep.
right? So there's a big leap there. And we build programs around all of the activity that we're doing to alleviate this burden. But again, we get caught up in that same cycle of alleviating a symptom,
Yep.
but we're never really solving a problem. And what happens is it's really hard to grow exponentially by doing that. Now, in some ways, it's actually easy to get money and easy to get volunteers for that kind of
Yep.
stuff because
Yeah.
it's, it's really feel good stuff. It's kind of low hanging fruit. And again, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. It's a very necessary part of what we're called as believers to how, in terms of how we serve the world and our community, right? But again, if we want to become leaders who are having a greater impact in the world and stewarding the resources and the responsibilities that God has given us, well, we need to learn to think more strategically.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's huge. And so, Rob and I have been doing this thing. We've been doing this thing that you've coined. Came from you, is a strategic storyline,
Yeah.
right? And so, what we've been doing is we've been helping leaders. They come in and they're like, "Man, I hit the ceiling." Right? They hit a
Yeah.
ceiling. I haven't been able to raise money over this or grow past this. They need clarity. They're like, "Man, how come?" It's not doing what I thought it was going to do, or they're starting a nonprofit or a church or a ministry or
Or
business,
getting burned out on the
or,
same
or
stuff,
they're
right?
getting burned out and they're like, or they see the reality that this is not sustainable.
Right.
And so I think it'd be helpful for those for our listeners to, can we just walk through that?
The storyline?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Can just like
Yeah,
so
yeah.
here's some of the elements for you guys to as you start thinking about this and going, are you a strategic leader? Because as Rob and I have been meeting with all these incredible leaders,
Yeah, they're amazing.
they're amazing leaders. And some of them have been doing it a really long time.
15 plus years.
15 plus years. Like, what we do is as we start just asking these questions, like moving them through the framework, they're going like, oh, they didn't connect all their activity to a larger strategy or to a really clear vision.
Yeah.
And so everybody's giving them accolades for doing all this activity. Like it's just, oh man, and we do this and we do that, we do that. Like, just know that if you work with Rob and I, and you tell us the 100 things that you're doing, you might see you might see us not be impressed.
Yeah.
Like we don't care as much
Activity
about,
doesn't impress me.
yeah, all the activity. We do this and we do that, we do that. We're gonna ask the question, why? Why?
Yeah.
Why? And then you're like, why am I so tired? Or why don't people stick around? Or how come I'm not being able to raise more money? And this is why. So what do we start with them? Well, we'll walk through it.
Well, the first thing we do usually is we take them all the way back to the beginning.
Yeah.
Right. We talk about the context in which you're serving
Mm-hmm.
and the people that you're serving in that context.
Yeah.
So we kind of have them break it down for us. Like, wait, hey, okay, tell us about your demographics. Tell us about the age group that you're trying to serve, right? And then tell us about things that they're suffering with. Why? What is the burden that caught your attention?
Pain points.
Yeah. What
Yeah.
are the pain points about this particular community or context and this particular set of people, right? And we try to get really clear about that, like hone in on that.
And what usually happens a lot of times in that very first space, they're like, well, it's everybody.
Yeah.
And we're like, but it's not
we serve
everybody.
everyone. Right. And I think that's where the beautiful part of the kingdom comes into play, right? Because, as Paul talks about, right, we're all different parts of the body.
Yeah.
And so what happens a lot of times is we despite what scripture tells us, we all want to be all the parts of the body, right? We want to serve this entire community. We want to solve all the problems. We want to solve all the ills. We want to relieve all the pain points. And we're like, yes, I get the heart, right? We get the heart behind that. But the practicality is that's not necessarily possible, nor is it what you should be focused on.
Right.
Because God has given you a unique perspective, a unique calling, a unique gifting, a unique makeup, right? And so if God has given you that uniqueness and then brought you into this context, there's something a little more specific that maybe he wants to use you for.
Right. Which fits with our leadership belief, where we're like, dude, it's you becoming who you were created to be. Like we love, one of the things that we love is when we take people through the process, it's really beautiful to see the way that God has created this person, their experiences, their expertise, their heart, their passions, why it's this particular group. And it's clear to see that God has called them to a group of people, you know what I mean, or to a context. And so, okay, so then we figure out the context.
So we get really clear about that. And then we ask the hard question. Okay, given this context that you're serving in, that God has called you to, and this community of people that he's called you to, and the pain points, what's the problem you're trying to solve?
Yeah. Now, and this is a big one, friends. Like, you would think people who's been doing it for 15 years, who have a heart, maybe they're experts in it, you would think, and shoot, for even for us, you would think that it'd just be like, well, of course you know.
Yeah.
No,
No.
a lot of times you're not very clear about what is the actual problem you're trying to solve, and a lot of that has to do with, yeah, you might be in the space, but unless you're strategic and you've been going through this process, a lot of times you're just like kind of surface level, like go back to the homelessness piece. People are hungry. Well, then you got to ask, well, why are they hungry? What is the problem within trying to solve homelessness in this area? What's the actual problem that we're trying to solve? What is it solution that we can bring to it? And what's underneath all that? And that takes, those are, right? A lot of times you want root cause.
Yeah. We're looking for what's behind all of the symptoms.
Yes. The thing beneath the thing, right?
I think you have a friend who wrote a
Yeah,
book.
Steve Carter. Shout out to Steve Carter.
Yeah, Thing Beneath the Thing.
Thing beneath the thing. And so you have that. And so a lot of times leaders have a hard time going, oh, that's it. And this is where that type of leader, where we've talked about I'm just a lot of activity, a strategy, not strategy, but tactical. Meeting needs. I know in organizations that's like the mission is the need, right? Like the problem with that is just like, well, you're never going to change anything, and then they'll be like, but for this starfish, it matters. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and you're like, okay, but if you, in community development, if you pull a body out of a river, oh man, great, dude, you saved somebody. Praise God. And then another body is floating down, somebody's drowning, you pull them out. Now you spend your whole time pulling people out of the river, and you never go up river to see, like, why are people keep on
You never ask the question, right?
falling in the river in the first place? Oh, well, there's not a fence right here. Oh, well, maybe we should build a fence there. But then it's like, but you can't because somebody owns that. Okay, now you're starting to get into deeper systemic issues of, hey, there's not access to keep people safe from falling in the river here. And why is that?
Yeah.
And maybe it's because somebody set up a river rescue, business.
Right,
you know what I mean?
right.
And like, so it can get into some, and that's where
I'll lose my funding if I solve the problem.
all that, man. And so, but we want, as leaders, we got to be serious about that. Okay, so then it's to the problem, right?
Well, so again, why that question is really important, though. And there was a bestseller book that came out not too long ago by this man named Simon Sinek, right?
Oh yeah,
which is Know Your Why. And all these companies were, oh yeah, we got to know our why. That's exactly why you asked that question.
Yeah.
Right? Because the answer to what problem are you trying to solve becomes the why you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
So we try to get to that place with our leaders. And then the next thing is, okay, so now I know, okay, I get really clear. And we're talking about very specific language, right? Because we want to be as clear as possible about, well, what is the problem we're trying to solve, right? We're not just trying to solve like, oh, end world hunger. Okay, great. But in your community, what is the specific thing, right? So once we have that, then we say, okay, what is the thing that you bring to the table? What is the need that you can fill with regard to trying to solve this problem? And that's the question, I think, that then kind of leads us, it almost, and sometimes when we figure out that need that we're trying to fill, right? What part of the body are we really functioning as with regard to this problem? That almost automatically writes your mission in a lot of cases, right? We see that, we're like, oh, yeah, that's the need I'm trying to fill. And we're like, well, that's your mission right there, right? By focusing on the mission and being very specific about the problem you're trying to solve, the people you're trying to help, and the context in which you're serving, those components, become the mission. In fact, we have a formula that we use. It's a really simple formula, which is our mission is to do X, whatever X is that we're called to do, right? For the purpose of Y, which is the why. And then in pursuit of what? In pursuit of this context changing kind of approach that we want to take, right? So the mission becomes then super clear. And that's where we spend a little time kind of wordsmithing. But again, the key to this as we walk leaders through this is it has to feel like, oh yes, this is what I have been doing for the past 10 years. I just didn't have language for it.
Right.
I didn't know how to talk about it. I didn't even fully understand it. I just knew this is what I wanted to do.
And that's what's beautiful, guys, about this process and our leadership paradigm is because it really takes about who you are. We don't want you to be a bootleg version of anybody else. It's like, and so when we're talking to people, it's like their passion, their their experience, their shoot, all the things that make them them,
Which is another one of our certification classes, right?
right?
Which is leading as
As
designed. We
designed,
want you
like
to lead as God has designed you to lead.
this is who you
Yeah.
are, and so as you work through the need of that, but a lot of times it takes somebody from the outside to just name some of those things because
Yeah.
they're like, well, Tommy, why do you do that the way you do? And you're just like, I don't, I don't know. And that's a beautiful self-discovery on your own, right? To go like, oh, why am I like this? And oh, well, because I grew up in this neighborhood and I had this mentor and
Right.
whatever the mix is for you. And so that I think that part's is I love that part when we get to that stage of this and we just go what the need is. And then, like you said, it basically just writes
Yeah.
the mission statement, which then when we're looking at that, and that's what the next thing was, right?
Right.
Then we
Right.
get into your mission statement.
Yeah.
And
And it's always awesome to compare
yeah.
what we
With the
just
current,
got
yeah.
them to by asking all these questions and getting deep to try to
Yeah.
understand their heart and their passion and the burden and even their DNA, right?
Yeah.
To get to that. And then look at the old mission statement that they had. And they're like, oh,
Which is usually, friends, just to give you some heads up, is usually pretty generic,
yeah.
super broad, wide.
Yeah.
It begs a lot of questions like, well, what do you mean by
Right.
love? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or like empower or, these kind of words. And then so it really starts to kind of shape that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So then what happens is once we have the mission, pretty dialed out, then we ask the question, okay, so the mission for us is the thing that fuels you to get up every morning. It's the thing you
Yeah.
want to do every day, right? And that's a beautiful thing, right? You're going to serve in this way every single day. That's the mission. Where do you want that to take you? That's what we call
Right.
the vision,
Yeah.
right? What's the destination? And sometimes the way that we ask that is we say, hey, if you were to complete your mission completely, you solved the problem in this context, what does that
Yeah.
now look like?
What does the world look like? Yeah.
What does the world look like? What does that community look like? What do the people in that community look like? That becomes the vision,
Yeah.
right? That becomes
Describe
like
it? Yeah.
the end destination of, yes, the reason I'm doing this mission is to relieve this burden and solve this problem for these people so that we can get to this place,
Yeah.
this future kind of vision or future idea of what the world should look like.
I love that. And the next step from that too is values. When we talk
Yeah.
about values, a really great way that we talk about this, friends, is if you think mission, vision, values, it's like the vision really is the destination. So if I were to say, hey, listen, Rob, we got to go to this place called Seattle, right? We got to drive up the coast and we got to go to Seattle. And you're like, why? And I describe Seattle to you. It's beautiful. It's by the water. It's a city. There's this like really weird thing they call the Space Needle, and you see Rainier in the background.
Yeah.
It has snow, and like I'm describing it to you, and you're like, I really want to go there.
Yeah,
That's where I
that'd be
want to
great.
go. I'd love to see that. Cool. And then a lot of times people give that kind of vision, and then they're like, how are we going to get there is the question. Well, the way we're going to get there is the vehicle is the mission, right? Or that's the fuel,
yeah.
right? So, but if I told you, Rob, I said, hey man, it's 600 miles away or whatever it is, like, and you're like, okay, it's kind of far, right? And then I'm like, hey, jump on my handlebars, bro. We're going to go. This is the mission. So the fuel that you want and the vehicle and fuel that you want is your two legs, Tommy, and you got some skinny legs and a bicycle? That doesn't make sense. Now, friends, the reason we're saying this is because a lot of you have the grand visions and you have this mission, but when you talk to funders, they're like, they see how are you going to get there like this? That doesn't even make sense. So your mission is that vehicle and the fuel you use to get that moving. The values are the guardrails that keep you on the right road, right? So the values are what we know. Hey, here are the things that are going to keep us moving towards that vision.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that it's really important to understand as you're executing the mission toward the vision, what's going to keep you in line, right? What are the things as you called it, we call it the guardrails, right? That know that, hey, you're starting to veer a little. Because here's the thing, we don't want to just complete the mission and the vision at all costs.
Exactly.
right?
Like you don't, you're running over people
That's how
and
we're getting in
cactuses and
trouble,
yeah.
right? Is that we
Yeah,
think like, no, what matters is the mission and the
yeah.
vision, and we're going to get there at all costs.
It
And
matters how
you're
you get
leaving,
there.
yeah, you're leaving dead people in the wake, and church hurt and all this other stuff on the way to that vision, because all that matters to you is the mission, the vision. What we're
Mm,
saying is equally important are the values that guide you as you execute this mission toward the vision.
yep.
And so we try to walk them. We usually say, 3 to 5 like core values,
Yeah.
right? And again, that's what last episode we talked about empowerment, right?
Yep.
That's why everybody has one of those core values. Like, well, along the way, I want to empower people. Like,
Well,
okay,
like, do you?
yeah, do you really though?
Yeah.
Yeah. But
That's
we
good.
want to make sure that they're clear about what are the things that are going to guide you as you do this. And now the thing about values is we say they're two sides of the same coin, right? Values dictate or determine how you relate to the outside world. So they have to see that you're actually engaging them with these values. But they also have to, and this is really important, they also have to tell you how you operate internally.
Exactly. And this is that what you might call corporate culture. It's the culture part of it.
Right.
Are you
Right.
actually living out the values that you say you have and that you're maybe displaying on the outside? Are your people experiencing that? And this is our
Yeah.
big beef is like a lot of leaders are like, no, at any cost. So everybody outside is experiencing this wonderful
yeah.
stuff, but the people inside are suffering because, well, but we're here to reach these people. So your life is expendable if we're reaching these people. And we're going, don't do it that way.
Yeah.
a
I mean,
better
how
way.
many times do we hear about, oh, dude, these leaders are amazing. They're amazing. But we know the internal
Oh my gosh.
workings.
Woo.
And we're like,
Yeesh.
yeah, to the outside world, they're awesome. And I get that. And I get why people feel that way because they are living out their values externally. But internally, the people that work for them and the people that help with the organization,
Ugh.
they don't feel the same thing. Right. So if I,
Yeah, it's terrible.
if
Yeah.
I say, man, look, we want to value each person's, experiences, right,
Yeah,
and their
uniqueness and stuff.
uniqueness and all this stuff, and everybody from the outside feels that, but then internally we're like, dude, I just do your job. I don't really care. I don't really care that
Exactly.
I don't really care that you don't like this or this is not your gifting.
Yeah,
just
yeah.
do it because it helps me get there.
Go ahead, make a comment if this is you. Oh,
Yeah, yeah,
well, I
yeah.
guess you can't because then you're like, your boss will say it.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, man.
Right.
Okay, so then we get to values.
Well, this is the part that I really love because
Yeah,
again,
this is my favorite part.
once you get to that place, you can already tell the story of your organization or of the
Oh,
vehicle
yeah.
that God has entrusted to you, where you just that's why we call it a strategic storyline, because it helps you tell your story. And the beautiful thing is, because everything was derived from everything else, it's all in alignment.
Yeah,
Everything.
It makes
Your
sense.
values
Yeah.
are aligned with the vision. The vision is aligned with the mission. The mission is aligned with the need that you're feeling. The need actually helps you solve the problem. The problem that you're solving is making a difference in the community or the
so
context
good.
and the people.
But the next part, though, which is my favorite part, and I love that when you get this, you get this strategic storyline, you get to this place, you're through the values. Even at that point, you and I it takes us 60 seconds to share
to
a
tell that
really
story.
compelling story of somebody else's that we just met, right? Then we get in, and here's the part. Then we get into their programs. So tell me about the specifics of how your mission works. What are the programs that actually work in your mission to reach that vision? And this is where all of a sudden, after we have all that, then they describe all the things that they're doing.
Yeah.
And we're sitting there kind of dumbfounded, like, why do you do a million things, right?
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about that. Like as we walk people through that.
Yeah. Well, again, I think it's because of the jump. Earlier, I said, we make the jump from burden to activity and we
Mhm.
start doing stuff. And then we build programs around the stuff that we feel is making a difference in people's lives. And again, please hear us. It might be. God,
Yeah.
Again, God is at work, despite our efforts, right? But he's also at work in everything. He's going to be the redeemer. He's going to be the
Yeah.
restorer. He's going to do what he's going to do. Okay. We're not saying that God isn't working just because, you're not doing it right. What
Yeah.
we're saying is that is only going to get you so far. Leading from activity is only going to get
Yeah.
you so far.
Yeah.
You got to shift to lead from strategy. So the reason is that a lot of times you're going to create more activity around the things that make you feel better, make others feel better, that you can get funding around, right? Somebody might come to you and go, man, I really love the way you're doing what you're doing. Can you start doing this and I'll give you money for that?
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, yeah, I'm not going to turn down money. So you kind of add bolt-on programs. I always describe it as like, the vehicle and the hood, that guy that bought his first vehicle and hood and then just started bolting on all kinds of things on it.
He
he's
made
got
his own spoiler.
Yeah, he's like driving a Monte Carlo with Impala mirrors, and he's got a bumper from a Chevy Ford or Camaro, right?
Yeah, man.
Or whatever. It's just like, what? A Chevy Ford Camaro.
Yeah, yeah.
That's kind of an oxymoron. A Chevy Camaro, right? But he's got all these bolt-on things, and he's driving this car, and he's like super proud of this car. And you're just looking at him going like, oh, okay. He's got the little horn, and everything. That's kind of what I see sometimes in our programs is that we just start bolting things on without really any strategic thought about, well, where is that? How's that helping me move, toward my vision or even just move my mission forward? And so for us, when we get to this program piece, we say, okay, what are the things that you need to do now to actually move this mission forward, right? How do you move the big rocks toward the vision?
Yeah.
And then it becomes much more of a compelling story because now you can look at those programs and go, oh yeah, we're doing too much in this area, but it's not really moving the needle for us.
Right.
Maybe we need to invest more in this area. And sometimes they're doing some really, really good work, but that's not the place that they're investing all of their time and energy toward.
Right.
And we see that and go, oh, dude, this is what you should be doing.
Yeah.
Right? Because now that part, you can see how it ties to the rest of the storyline.
Yeah.
Right?
And this is the part, friends, where it's like, we're always looking for process. We're looking for there's steps. There's like places where there's handoffs. So if you say you want this neighborhood to look this way or this person to experience, right, the leadership thing from going from here into becoming something else, right?
Right.
A lot of times it's disjointed. It's just like, well, why do you do that? Well, and then you'll over spiritualize it and you'll be like, well, I mean, what, you just want me to let them go hungry? And you're like, no.
Because I'm called to love God and love people.
I'm called to love God, love people. But I'm like, well, I know that there's 6 other feeding programs.
Right.
So maybe you don't need to do this. And what you're really good at is this part, is the case management part, whatever it is. And that's a part where we're just like, think strategically, how do people move from this place to this place to that? Like, that's the leadership part. It's like, how do they go from this state to this state? How are they changing in that? And a lot of times it's just like, they're not. And it's so like, I hope people change. And then that's why you don't have metrics. You only have anecdotal stories.
Right.
And those stories aren't replicable. They're just, so then you can't scale.
Well, they are as long as you're involved in the story every time.
Exactly. That's another huge one, actually.
Yeah.
So a lot of times you guys as leaders, your gifting, you've been living in it, but because you're not empowering other people to become who they were created to be, everything is based on you. And if you weren't there, or if you took a sabbatical, or if it all falls apart. Look, friends, we don't want to build things that are built on you.
Right.
We want to build things that are built on, God.
Yeah.
On things that last, truth, the word of God, So this is why we take you through this place. And so once we get through the program side of it, and we help you think strategically in that area.
Yeah.
Hey, you move from this to this to this. This is one of the hardest things for leaders because they don't want to cut anything.
Yeah.
They want to do everything, and they can make an excuse why they need to do all the things, even though their marriage isn't doing really well, their relationships aren't doing well, they're not getting the funding, they're burned out, they're all the stuff. There's a better way to do it.
Which is equally important to us.
Yeah.
Right? Is not just the work that you're doing, but you and your family and the health of, you as a leader, as an individual.
Because we're saying, hear me when I say this, friends. We're saying, can you do this in a healthy way? Yes, you can.
You can.
You absolutely can. Now, are you going to have to break some habits and some mindsets, some philosophies and theologies? Yeah, you are, because you've been doing it in a certain way for so long, and you've gotten accolades for it, and the system will reward you, but you're not actually making a huge impact.
Yeah,
and that's what's killing us. So, okay, so then we move from that.
Well, then now that you have all of this, and you're clear about the programs and what you want to accomplish through them, now we get to set some strategic objectives. Okay. So what are the big things you're going to accomplish in the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah.
Right. Based on this new model this whole new mission and vision and the values and the programs that you're doing, and you could see now the impact that
Yep.
you're going to have. What is it? What kind of impact do you want to have? How, and that's where you start building in metrics to these objectives.
Yeah.
Not that we're trying to be all like super corporate about it, but I think it's important, right, to measure what you want to see and make sure that you're using these things as a way to say, well, okay, am I doing? Because here's the thing about strategy. Strategy isn't a one and done kind of thing. It's something you need to do every year because
you learn.
Yeah, and what might have been a great strategy this year is
Things
not
change.
a great I mean, let's just pandemic.
Yeah.
Right? What was working in 2018, 2019, in 2020 died. Right?
Yeah.
So whatever strategies you had just went out the window. So because our environment is constantly changing, our world is constantly changing, technology is changing, we're changing.
Yeah.
Strategy also needs to change as well. Now, here's the thing though. The mission, once you get to that, because the mission was extracted from kind of your heart, what God has called you to, and how you were designed to lead, the mission should not change very often. I mean, you could tweak it a little here and there. That shouldn't change very often. Your vision can change. If you set a limited vision, we're saying, oh, hey, in 5 years, we want to be here. Cool. Then every 5 years, you can kind of go with another vision. Or you can do the big, bold, audacious, like, no, at some point in my lifetime, I want to see this happen, in which case your vision doesn't change much either. But the strategy is okay to change on a regular basis because you're just going to be learning new things and new ways. And it's important that we keep that strategy fresh so that we're making sure that the things that we set out to do are actually accomplishing what we want them to do, and that we're not just holding on to something because, well, that's what we started doing,
Yeah. No, that's so good, man. I love that, dude. And so once you guys get there, then it's kind of like, all right, you now you have the big kind of goals. The next thing is actually like, what are the things you need to do to reach those strategic objectives in the next year?
Next year, right.
Right. And then you set those. What I love about this is, guys, once you have all this, one, you could tell your story really well.
Less than 3 minutes, you can clearly tell your story.
The whole thing, right?
Yeah.
And then the other thing this does is it helps you. The way that you can do this in a healthy way is you can pace well when I know I got to hit these 3 things or these 5 things in the next 3 years. I know what I'm going to do this year for it. I'm really clear about what I'm doing. And that way we're not like frenetic. Like, I remember it's like, oh, what's going to be sexy? So then you're always coming up with new programs. Do you know how it exhausts your staff?
Oh, yeah.
And your volunteer team and your people is for you to come up with something new like all the time. And so you're working really hard this way, and then you got to shift this way. Now you got to go it is, and we see that kind of tactical activity driven stuff all the time. It's terrible.
Tactical whiplash.
Yeah, it's tactical whiplash. It's terrible. So stop doing that to people. But if you're successful in that system, well, then that's how you're going to know how to lead, right?
Yeah.
And we're saying there's a different way to do it. Once you guys get these things done, then we actually get to what?
The marketing piece.
The marketing piece. Like,
how do you actually
story. Tell that story?
And so from all of this, this language that we built and the core values and the mission and vision, the marketing piece almost writes itself.
Yeah.
Right. You just kind of like, okay, well, what's the big idea that I want to tell here? And then what's a simple tagline, which is often just a portion of your mission that you can say easily.
Oh, yeah.
As a part of a tagline, right? So again, the thing that's important about this is because we built it from the ground up, everything is aligned.
Yeah.
Right? Everything is built on the foundation of, hey, who were you called to serve? What was the burden to begin with, right? Who were you called to serve? What was the context? What are the pain points? Because we started with that and we extracted it, that's why everything falls in place and is super aligned. One of the things that I think is important to mention about strategy is, for me, I don't know if this is an actual, part of what people think about strategic planning. For me, when we work with leaders, the most beautiful thing about the strategic process for me is extracting you.
Yes.
Into the organization.
Yes.
Your DNA, your heart, your passion, and building an organization or a system or a movement or a group around that.
Yep.
And when you were talking about, well, how does this sustainable beyond me? Because I would hope as leaders, we're trying to build something that lives beyond us.
Oh yeah.
It's not just for our lifetime, but something that's going to continue his impact, right? And so the strategic planning process for me is a way to extract all of that and systematize it, for lack of a better term, into these processes and this organization that can live on beyond me.
Which is beautiful because it's like the best of your DNA
Yeah.
gets like imprinted on this thing, and yet it's not about you.
Right.
It takes the gift of who you are and at this certain time and space, and then sets up all these beautiful processes and mission and vision and all these things. And yet someone with a different skill set than you could actually come in and continue to grow that. That'll take it to the next level.
Right.
That'll take it to a whole nother place. And it's beautiful. And that way, even transitions will be a lot easier. So it's not like, hey, you got to run it like how I run it. No, run it how you run it. But man, I built you a really beautiful system.
Yeah.
I built you something that you can come in and then in your gifting take to a whole nother place. And that's beautiful.
Which, by the way, just really quickly, because I encourage people to do strategic planning in their families. So
that's right.
I do strategic planning with our family because, again, I'm trying to do the same thing, right? If I have the things that I've learned and the things that God has placed on my heart for my family, like I want to leave a legacy, right, about what that is. And so we do strategic planning to kind of establish some of these foundations, even within our own family, so that they will live on beyond just me, right? That's for me. Again, I know people that know me realize that I live and breathe strategy. I love to talk about it.
Yeah, man. And so, hey, friends, we hope that that's been really good for you guys. I think we just took you through a process that we've been doing with our leaders.
Yeah, you're welcome.
You're welcome, right? We also know that it's helpful to have a guide in that. That's what UYWI is here for, man. We're here to help you lead in a different way so that you can lead this next generation into the kingdom of God, that they may know who they are created to be and give God glory through that. So
Amen.
We hope that's been helpful to you. Go ahead, smash that like button, make sure you share this, subscribe, send it to people. I hope that this episode, even specifically, send it to a whole bunch of people. Yep. And then if you're interested in working with us here, we help people through this process. But here it is for you. We give this stuff away for free.
Yep.
And so it's there for you guys. So again, thanks for joining us on another episode, and we'll see you guys next time.
Yeah, much love.
Peace.